Very rarely do companies release their entire data set related to their customers' performance. It can be scary to be so transparent. Like, what if a prospect sees it and they're just really not impressed? Well, this is our second year releasing our B2B advertising benchmark report, and today, Silvio Perez and I are going to go through some of the interesting insights from that report and just try to make sense of it all. Demand Gen U is officially in session. Let's do it. All right, everybody. Back with another episode of Demand Gen U. I get to do it with Silvio today. I know, Silvio, you've been on twice so far. Is that with Mark, or once or twice, or how many times have you been on so far?
I can't remember. I think it's like either twice or three times.
Yeah, nice. Well, I know we get a lot of good comments when you're on, so thanks for coming on with us again. Great topic for us. We're going to talk through, just like some of the insights and data points from our benchmark report, and just pull out some of the things that we thought were maybe a little interesting, and trying to make sense of it, and also maybe help folks listening who want to use the benchmark report, like, figure out how to use it a little bit more adeptly. Because, like, the thing is not, there's a lot of data in there, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can really kind of hang yourself.
Yeah, sounds great. And just to add on to that, take these benchmarks as, just inputs. Don't take them as exactly how you phrase it, like hang yourself. Unfortunately, too many people get caught up in comparing their performance to benchmarks, and they let that cripple them. Where, if their CPL is $200 and the benchmark saying it should be 100, then they hold themselves accountable against that. So really, like, using this as a tool just to give you some insights on what are general trends that you're seeing, things that maybe you can lean into and, gather those insights, which we're going to talk about, and push that into your experimentation, but don't think of it as like, there's so many variables, right? For every industry segment, every different ad type, bid strategy involved, to just use it as like a general guidance, I would say.
Yeah, totally. And like when you're looking at some of the benchmarks, maybe use that as like, oh, someday. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, like someday we'll get there. You can use it that way. But, like we were mentioning, the most important thing is to understand where you're at today. And then if it's not great, and even if it's great, like, what are your plans to continue to improve it? And what does that look like? Is it a 3% improvement, a 50%? Like what can you do to improve where you're at? And then maybe just use the benchmarks as like, okay, there's some companies getting that, so at least I know that's there. But yeah, man, in my career, I've been screwed so many times by benchmarks that, like, my CMO would find, right? They'd be like, hey, I saw this benchmark report, and I'm just curious, like, and oftentimes it feels like it's around email or something. I don't know why. It feels like I was always getting like these email benchmark reports sent to me. It's like, what do ours look like? It's like, oh, damn it, because immediately as an analyst, how much, like, you don't know is wrapped up into that data, right? How did they take it? Which customers? What are the segments? And oftentimes they're not clear about that, in the reporting. So you're just like, man, I'm trying to uphold myself to like the top 2% in the world of something because somebody put out a benchmark report that somehow my CMO got. So yeah.
You also lose focus.
And we tried to do it a little bit differently, to give you that ability to like get out of those averages.
For sure. And you lose focus on the main KPIs. So like with the email example, maybe that report said the best open rates are like 52%, and yours is 46%. Now you're beating yourself up, but you lose focus of what really matters. What's your North Star, right? Like reply rates, pipeline, etc. And you start holding yourself against like these very superficial metrics that aren't really going to, drive that performance you're looking for.
Yep, exactly. So, you know what? If we haven't done one, maybe we'll do another episode on how do you properly set goals. Because I think like there's probably a lot of people out there that don't know how, honestly. They're just like, what am my buddy getting over there? And like, maybe that's my goal. Yeah. So that'd be a good episode. Sure. Cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how we put it together. I know we had a whole episode, like Justin, Mark, and I talked about like how we put it together. I just want to like just recast that for people that didn't listen to that episode. So, the benchmark report for us, it basically looks at all of our customers' data for the past year. So we looked, the latest cut was 2021. And we have all of this advertising performance data, right? We have everything, all the way from spend to the ad channel metrics like, clicks and click-through rate, et cetera, cost per lead, all the way though down into like cost per opportunities, triggered opportunity amounts. And we can do it that way because we're connected to Salesforce for a majority of our customers. But this is where the first rub comes in, is that not all of our customers are connected to Salesforce. And so one of the things about the benchmark report is we had to have a way of identifying which customers are not connected to Salesforce. And then when we calculate the cost per opportunities or any of the cost pers or any of the metrics that need Salesforce data, we just have to take them out. We have to take the entire experiment row out so that we don't inflate, basically like our cost pers. Because if you can think about it this way, like if we had all their spend metrics up front, but we didn't have the, it's just adding to the spend, you know what I mean? But still this lower like opportunity amount. And so you're like, wait, what's going on? And honestly, the first version of the benchmark report we released this year, unfortunately, didn't have that fix in it. And so that's where people could go in and even still get a bad example of like what this looks like with metadata. And we finally were able to fix it a couple of weeks after we released it. But, we kind of shit the bed a little bit with some people, I'm sure, because they saw it and they're not going to come back and look at it again. And I don't think we even sent a correction out, So those are just like, that's just one example of how this can get a little hairy as you're putting it together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the transparency is key, right? How we source the data so people can understand that. You can understand the definitions involved when looking at the benchmark report. So you can really understand how everything was put together and really draw those insights for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the team it takes to put it together is pretty big. We have internally, we've got like a data scientist on our team that works to help put it together. One or two people from our dev team that has to like extract the data, transform it in a way. Then I have to hire an analyst on our side, like a data engineer, a very, very solid one. And then this year we actually hired a Tableau developer, so that we can put it in a visual, like a nicer visualization than Data Studio. So there's a lot of people involved. And then Justin, we have a content writer, that has to write the entire report, which is a very long report. So it's a big effort. And this year, like I thought we'd do it faster, but it actually took us longer this year than last year. And so next year we'll start it even earlier and see if we can get it out. Like I want to get it out like within a month or 6 weeks of the year closing. It's
going to be super interesting to see year over
months.
year too, the trends and what's changing and the shifts in terms of go to market strategies. Is that reflected in KPIs and things like that? So for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Okay, let's jump into some of the data now. I think first, it'd be good to just give people like an overview. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the input metrics that went into this. So in 2021, our customers put through about $42 million of spend through our platform, and that's across LinkedIn, Facebook, and we actually didn't add the Google Ads channel into it in 2021 just because it was so new. And we also don't have our display spend in here. So just everybody that is looking at this, our display is in a separate bucket, and we didn't want to include it in here because it could throw some of the metrics off. Silvio, talk about that a little bit. Like why is that?
Different channels have different strengths and weaknesses. So if we have display spend in there, Google spend in there, and they're all trying to promote lead generation, it's going to skew the data significantly. So things like that, just the nuances of channels, ad types themselves, all of those things have to go into consideration when putting this together.
Yeah. And we felt like display was a different enough, like what the outcome you're trying to drive to keep it separate. So we actually thought about doing a separate benchmark report just with the display data, but it was like, oh man, it was hard enough to get this one done. So maybe next year we'll do that. Through that spend is about 75,000 experiments run. And so an experiment in metadata is what would you equate that to in LinkedIn? Like I don't even know the terminology. A campaign. Okay, that's what I thought. Yep. So 75,000 campaign experiments. 25 billion with a B, $25 billion of, and this is what I hate, influenced pipeline. You know what I mean? So like We don't hang our hat on that one because it's a big number. But yep, metadata campaigns touched $25 billion of pipeline. But the one we're more interested in is like pipeline that was created, and so almost $200,000 of triggered marketing sourced pipeline for our
Something to note
customers.
really quick too, Jason.
Or sorry, million. I said thousand. $200 million.
A really important, yeah,
Just
yeah,
a whole $200,000. Sorry,
all the
go ahead,
pipeline.
Sylvia.
Some really like a really quick note on the influence versus triggered is clients determine how they count influence versus triggered. So that's another thing as well is
Good point.
we're
Yeah.
aggregating all this data, but the way clients take that into consideration is on a per client basis based on the different models they're using.
Yeah, and that's actually a benefit of our platform, honestly. You can configure how the platform does attribution. We don't just pick one and like force you to use it, because we want our data to match the way you report as close as possible. And so, yeah, how many different models can you choose from and then you can totally customize too. I can't
Four
remember.
models. Yeah,
Yeah,
contacts,
and then you can go to
association,
full
and
custom, right?
primary, and I might be missing a fourth one. 3 or 4.
Cool, nice. All right. So that's some of the summary metrics, and so with that, we'll start talking about LinkedIn versus Facebook a little bit, because that's like that's always like one of the discussion points. What should I be running on LinkedIn and Facebook? So in the data we have, Facebook has a lower cost per click, but jumps up above LinkedIn on cost per lead. So I think this is part of why we direct some of our customers to maybe primarily promote top of funnel, mid funnel stuff in Facebook, where you can get lower cost to content, but then maybe retargeting in LinkedIn for the lower funnel activities like a demo request or something like that. What are your thoughts on that? So,
Yeah, I struggle because it's so. The one thing I will say is test for yourself and see what works for you. Generally speaking, yes, Facebook costs are cheaper on the front end, and then LinkedIn is much more expensive. It also has to just do with the bidding model involved in those channels and how you're billed. So Facebook is on a CPM basis, LinkedIn is on a CPC basis. So typically you're going to see lower upfront costs on Facebook, and you're going to see a lot more expensive costs upfront on LinkedIn. But really, not just paying attention to that cost per lead metric, but all the way down to actual triggered opportunity is super insightful, because you can have it can lie, right? You can have a Facebook experiment driving a ton of leads at super low cost, but if they never convert into pipeline, then obviously you don't want to put more dollars around that.
exactly. And we do see the cost per lead. It's not hugely different, but about 164 average in LinkedIn and 225 average on Facebook. And I think that's that helps you understand it a little bit there too. And I've tried to make sense of that in my mind, in some ways, because like to me it's interesting. I don't know why it's interesting. It should be very clear, but if I think about like, hey, I'm just in a feed, right? I'm not in my mind. I'm like, I'm on the Facebook feed right now. Or I'm on the LinkedIn feed right now. I'm kind of like, all right, I'm scrolling mindless shit, and I see an ad, and it's either relevant to me or it's not. But it's very clear. Like Facebook performs differently than LinkedIn, and so I don't know. I mean, is it really subconsciously like people are more like entertainment focused and that kind of thing when they're on Facebook? I mean, what do you think, or have you seen any studies?
I have a
on that? I don't know.
hunch that it's even simpler than that. I think it's because so many B2B marketers are new to advertising on Facebook, like especially our clients. That's a big value add of why they use metadata. And Facebook does have nuance. They're very similar, but there's nuance. And I think there's almost like a learning curve on the B2B side of leveraging Facebook. And I think that might be why we're seeing higher upfront costs. So I think there's like that skill gap, if you will. The other thing with Facebook specifically versus LinkedIn is the creative needs are a lot higher. Ad fatigue sets in typically a lot quicker than LinkedIn. And a lot of B2B teams are strapped when it comes to like creative resources, and they can't, like output the amount of creative required to stay on top of that. So I'd be interested to see over the years as like Facebook becomes more and more normal for B2B, how that trend
Right.
develops.
Yeah. Do you think it does Facebook require different, it kind of, I think you kind of mentioned it, like a different creative than LinkedIn? Like, do we see that at all, or have we tested
For the
that?
most part, they're the same. I mean, dimension wise, they're the same. It's just there's
Yeah.
nuance on both platforms. So, for example, one of the things that I've seen work really well on Facebook that we're not really seeing yet is long form copy. There's really like a good opportunity to do long form copy on Facebook versus LinkedIn, but people are not really
Yeah.
taking advantage of that. It also
Yeah.
requires, most B2B ads are like 1 to 2 lines of text and it's like very short and to the point, but telling story through copy in long form is very effective
Yep.
and powerful on Facebook. And that's what I've seen a lot of success with that I don't see a lot of our customers doing and a lot of B2B marketers in general doing. So it'd be interesting to have if they lean
Yeah.
into that.
Yep. Yeah. No, I know. I've been attracted to an ad that's a lot like a super long form. And you're right. That takes a totally different. You got to hook them to the story, like you said. It's got to be a story. It's got to like somehow trigger an
Hmm.
emotion. You know what I mean? In me, like I'm not going to read an ad, right? Like so, there's got to be something in the ad for me itself for me to read that whole thing. And some of them get goddamn
Yeah.
long, right? Like I've seen, like you click it and it's like it just took up your whole phone. You know what I mean? You're just like, whoa, what is there an ad? Is there a length limit on Facebook? I mean, there
Yeah.
must be, but it must be
Yeah, no,
really
it's
long.
pretty long. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
it's pretty extensive, yeah. And the
Yep.
bigger the ask, like top advertisers, what they do is they pre-qualify the click. So like having long form copy is super powerful because you can tell a story and you can really, pre-qualify that visitor. So when they do click through, hopefully they're pre-sold, if you will, and they're more likely to take that action.
Nice. Well, this is actually shown in the data. So actually, I had it as one of my final points. Let me pull it up here. Doot, doot, doot. Oh no, it was actually not too far down. Yeah. So the text length. So like Facebook's highest one is for 300 plus characters. And it was like can't remember. I probably have it over here. 0.75% compared to like the next closest like in the 0.6%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something like that. I was like, oh wow. Oh yeah, here it is. Let's see. Ad text length, headline length. Yeah, 0.74 all the way down to 0.66% almost. And so, yeah, it's interesting to me. Does Facebook that click? That's not the click to expand the rest of the ad, is it? Or is it? Does that count as a click on Facebook
It
for long
does.
form?
There's different, like there's landing page clicks, but then there's
Ah,
also like, engagement type clicks. But yeah, that counts.
got it, got it. Okay. And so clicking to see more would register as a click
Yep,
on the ad.
exactly.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so maybe that's why that's a higher click through rate because people are actually dropping it down. Do you know what's the? I'm learning all this from you now. Like, so if I'm learning this, hopefully, like people, is there? Do you know what the character length is before you have to hit that see more? You know what I mean? Like, is that? I mean, I don't know if you know if I'll top of your head, but I'm sure that's a stat set or like a number somewhere. But
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but it's like usually like 1 to 2 lines, and then you have to click see more.
yeah, yeah, interesting strategy. I think it's something I might want to like try and pull on our storytelling
A big
capabilities.
thing people forget is when you're doing social advertising, the best social ads they mirror the best practices of organic posts. So if you're trying to create effective content natively on, let's say, LinkedIn, one of the best things you want to do is you want to have a hook in the first sentence and you want to get people to click see more so they can expand and read the rest of your post. The same thing goes with your ads. It's the same best practices. I think we people forget that paid advertising is just distribution. It's just taking what you're doing and amplifying it. So, but those same best
yeah.
practices, right? You're still talking to the same person. You're just paying for that, that spot to get in front of them.
Yeah, and honestly, the more it feels like it's in the feed, you know what I mean? Like that's one of the comments we got on, our the ad I do, where I'm like typing, and I turn
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Hey, you beat," like people have said, "I didn't even know that was an ad." They're like, "I just thought that was your post." And it's like, "Yes, that's what you're going for." And then it drives a demo at the end of it. You're like, "Oh shit, that's
I've
great."
literally seen like
Um,
on the B2C side, I've seen this one ad that's like literally the copy was this is an ad, and then everything was like long
yeah,
form copy in the actual post. Like things like that, absolutely.
yep,
Because
yep,
I always say this to our customers and just clients in general, but I'm like, think of yourself and the ads that you respond to. When it's generally like a typical ad, it looks like an ad, it feels like an ad, like you tune it out,
yep,
right? Versus if especially in
Yeah.
a social feed, right? You have to always put yourself in the mindset of the receiver and what are they using that platform to do. And I think
Yep.
that gets missed a lot of the times. Like we have like our advertising hat on, which like thinks completely differently versus like when we're thinking like as a content marketer or content creator, we think differently
Mm-hmm.
when really you should be thinking as like a
Yep.
content creator and just using advertising to just amplify that message through social channels.
Yeah, it's still offering, people something of value. You know what I mean? It's like there's something that they're going to get value from, educational content, something. Yeah, no, it's totally true. Cool. All right, so we touched on that a little bit. Anything else on LinkedIn versus Facebook? I mean, I think again, when you're just looking at averages, it's hard to really tell a huge difference. But and this is one where I'll say too, like we have some clients where they just they just go boom, like they go crazy on Facebook, and it just works
Yep.
well, and some that don't. And I think a lot of it is your audience. Where does your audience hang out? And I think some of these niche audiences, like let's take lawyers or doctors for example. They're not really on LinkedIn. They're not sitting there scrolling LinkedIn, but these are people that probably have a Facebook account or an Instagram account, and so it's like sometimes you're just not going to find people, even in B2B, that are on LinkedIn, and you got to find, but they're
Yep.
probably on Facebook. And if you can target them like you can with MetaMatch, from a business
Yeah.
perspective, then Facebook becomes like a super
Yeah,
viable
like the
channel.
most successful companies that I've advised here at Metadata, what they all started usually on LinkedIn because they know it to be tried and true. And then from there, what they do is they take what's worked for them on LinkedIn and they replicate it on Facebook, and they usually find the most success that way. And then they just start to expand off that.
Yeah, yeah,
One of
yep,
the
that makes
things I
sense.
did want to add on like the Facebook versus LinkedIn that I thought was super interesting was the cost per triggered opportunity for Facebook versus LinkedIn. To my surprise, the cost per triggered opportunity was actually lower on LinkedIn versus Facebook. Because again, going back to like, you know, overall, you think Facebook lower cost, et cetera, and it's true on the front end. But when you look at it in terms of like actual pipeline created, so far LinkedIn still seems
Yep,
to be the better of the two. And then the other thing too that I
yep,
thought was like for me, I'm still kind of struggling with like accepting as a fact with the data, because we all have like our own beliefs,
yep,
is auto bidding on LinkedIn. For the longest time, me
yeah.
and like my mentality with auto bidding is like it is like you don't do it because you're just gonna overpay on your different campaigns and you're just gonna your CPCs are gonna get extreme. But looking at the data, auto bidding on LinkedIn had a 10% higher average cost per click, but a 58% lower cost per triggered opportunity.
Yep, I saw that too. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, huh. And remind like, what's the difference? So manual bid is like I'm just going to go in and
Yeah,
put
exactly.
the
Like
amount I want, and auto
auto
bid
you give
flexes
so
it a
when you
little
when
bit,
you do a
right?
manual bid, you're basically telling LinkedIn like, "Hey, I only want to spend X amount per click." When you do auto bid, you're like,
Yep.
"LinkedIn, I trust you. I believe in you. Set my bid to what you want." And I will say like test for yourself because I do see for some
Yeah.
customers like it gets insane, like $130 cost per click for some experiments.
Oh
Like
wow.
LinkedIn can really take it out of whack. The same is true also on Google if you're using
Yeah.
auto bidding. You just have to keep an eye on it. But yeah, I thought that was super interesting because LinkedIn doesn't have pipeline data. So like in my head, I'm already
Right.
thinking on the
Right.
algorithm, like how are they like, is it because they're auto bidding?
How?
Like, do
Yeah.
they have those signals?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yep. I could have got lucky, I guess, as well. I
I
don't
want to
know.
like see the data and see if like
Yeah.
it continues to be true because that would be super
Yeah.
insightful.
So if you don't do auto bidding, how do you know where to start with your manual bid?
Yeah, so I always recommend to customers if you've been running LinkedIn campaigns already, just look at your average cost per click and set your manual bid 20% higher than that and use that as like a starting place.
Got it. Got it. Nice. Cool. All right. Let's talk about let's talk about conversation ads. You know what I mean? Because like I mean, obviously they've carried us for a long time. They are our, I don't know, probably still delivering 50% of our
The
inbound
breadwinner.
demand today, and they have for 2+ years. I mean, it's just been like in my mind, ridiculous. Like I still am surprised by how much, success we've had with conversation ads for how
Hmm.
long. But now that we have customers running them as well through our platform, we've got more data that shows why. And holy crap, like even just starting with like from a CPL standpoint, they're 50% lower than other ad types. So like, and we have them for like webinars and demos cut out here. So like a conversation ad for a webinar, $62. LinkedIn just standard post, 143. Facebook, $183. So it's like,
Yeah.
wow, 2x plus. And then on demos, conversation ads about $200 cost per demo. Normal LinkedIn 583 and Facebook
Hmm.
450. And that is like crazy different. And to me, it's not just that, but like the ad itself, you're delivering so much more information and qualifying them. And you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not only that it's lower cost, but they should
Yeah.
be better as well. You know
Yeah,
what I
it's
mean?
more
Like they should be
personal, the
better leads.
message. You can use a conversation flow to qualify, submissions and asking like questions before they submit the form. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then the follow on to this is that they turn into opportunities almost 2x that of standard ads. So like convo ad will turn into an opportunity at about 4.9%. And rest, like LinkedIn, just general LinkedIn 2.6, Facebook 2.9. So it's like, wow, that too. So not just like lower cost, but then they also then convert to an
Hmm.
opportunity, which is, even deeper at a higher rate, So it's kind of like, I guess I ask myself is if you're a B2B marketer and you're not doing conversation ads, like
Yeah.
why? Literally, please somebody reach out and tell me we've made a conscious decision to not even test conversation ads. Like please, if you are in that camp, DM me. I want to know. I literally want to know why because I recommend this to almost all of our customers who have not tried it. I'm like, and our playbook around this for demos involves an
Hmm.
incentivized demo. And sometimes I talk to customers and that's their
Yeah.
problem. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to do an incentivized demo." And then I show them the data and I talk to them about what actually happens, the psychology of it. And they're like, "Oh, okay, maybe," and then I write the copy for them and I did this for one CMO. And she was like, "Oh, I would never say that." I'm like, "I know. Just trust me." Just like you got to lean out over your skis a little bit. Don't worry about it. And sure enough, it worked, of course, because we've
Yeah, the,
tested
the
these
biggest
things like
reservation that I've seen
umpteen
just
times.
advising customers to use combo ads is, especially if there's a gift card, is they don't want to offer the incentive. They don't know how to fulfill on the incentive. So more of the operational stuff. And
Yeah.
then also too, that they'll generate, a lot of pipeline from combo ads with a gift card, but it won't actually close to revenue. That's been
Yeah.
the biggest
Yep.
gap, I think.
Yeah, and we looked at that too because we know that as well. We have about a 3 to 4% close rate on incentivized demos and a 12% close rate on non-incentivized. And you're like, holy shit, that's don't do conversation ads. But guess what happens? They're already cheaper, so like the unit economics still end up working out, but they don't. So the incentive gives them a reason to take the demo now. They may not have pain, you know what I mean, or enough pain that where they would take it just or looking for it. But okay, yeah, sure. Like, and if you're good with targeting, you know what I mean, like you're getting it to the right people and qualifying them again, right, making sure that again the right person. Then you're first to market.
Totally.
You know what I mean? You like get in front of them first, and if you have a platform that's different and they're like can let off some like oh shit moments, like ours does, you lock that in and then our data shows like they do come back around later. And so we don't create an opportunity initially and then the future opportunity might not be tagged to inbound, because like oh maybe outbound reached out or they just came in, and if they came in directly they'll be tagged to inbound, but we see them convert later on an unincentivized, like either a demo, like a website demo request, or they actually do end up getting back to the SDR like, hey, like we never
Yeah,
really ended up booking that demo, or we only took it one meeting, kind of wanted to come back and check it out. I've seen that so many
for
times,
sure.
like in Salesforce, where it's like all of a sudden somebody just pops back in, and it's like, oh, you look it back, and it's like 6 9 months ago they actually had the demo. They ended up ghosting the AE, maybe, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, that thing we did like six
Yeah,
months
that's
ago? I
that's
kind
it
of
right
want to
there.
see check
Honestly,
it out.
I always tell customers like you're planting seeds. Like, there's
Yep.
having qualified prospects learn more about your product generally is a good thing. It might not be the right time, but when it is, you are
Yep.
top of mind, right? And then ideally, that's like the first step, and you're doing other things too to nurture that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Like retargeting, like retargeting them, connecting with them on LinkedIn so that they start to see your content that you're distributing, organically.
One
Yeah.
of the
So
one of the
conversation
super
ads.
insightful things
Yes.
around conversation ads, especially like for us, we used it as a way of driving demos for so long, and that was like the primary focus. But one of the things that I'm actually seeing in the data and just with customers is they're a very versatile ad type. You don't have to just use it for
Hmm.
demos. Actually, I was looking at the benchmark report, and this was fascinating. Using convo ads to promote webinars and like events
Yep.
was 50 to 60% lower compared to like single image ads.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And if you think about it, it makes kind of sense, right? Because you're like, hey, here's an event we're doing, we'd love to have you register. And they can either say yes or, hey, tell me more,
Yep.
and then like, tell me more. Oh, we're going to do this. This is what you can learn, and you just give them a little bit more info. It's kind of like almost like they got to your event reg page. But the ad is almost your event reg
Yep.
page, where you're kind of like, you can talk about the whole value of the event, and all that stuff, and then get them to convert. And then, like you said, these are personal, right? Like it's coming from a person, not metadata. And I think that has something to do with it too. And that's actually a question I was going to ask you about Facebook. Like those long form ads, like they shouldn't be from the company though, right? Like, should they or can they be? Like if you're long form and
hmm
trying to grab emotion, like should we be running ads from ourselves, like on Facebook? I
I've
don't
never
know.
tested in B2B, but when I was in B2C, I saw that running ads through a personal page, like a person, so is a lot more effective than an actual company. And again, it's because people don't go on social media to, interact with companies. They're there to act with individuals.
Right. And I feel like if I'm telling a story, I want to hear a story from a person, not an entity,
Yep.
So maybe we can run an experiment like that,
Yeah,
Silvio. What
no,
do you
for
think?
sure. Like even just changing,
Run it
yeah,
from my
even just
account.
changing the company page logo from like you could still say Metadata.io, but like have a profile picture of you, A/B test against Mark and others,
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
see what converts better.
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, it's
Nice. Yeah, I like it. I got some more insights, but did you have any like that you found that you wanted to pull out that were kind of like,
yeah. One
huh?
of them for me was I know a very common life cycle of B2B SaaS companies is they want to go up market, right? Drive bigger deals, land, get in front of these 1,000+ companies, et cetera, employee size. When I was looking at the benchmark report, the cost per triggered opportunity, so I broke it out into three segments. So 1 to 100 employees, the cost per triggered opportunity was $5,280. 100 to 1,000 was 2668, and then 1,000 plus was 4898 across Facebook and LinkedIn. That was very interesting to me because I would have thought that reaching people, a smaller market segment, 1 to 100 employees, would be cheaper in terms of actual pipeline, but it's actually seems to be not the case. That like that mid market 100 to 1,000 mark is significantly lower, and then the 1,000 plus it does jump up compared to the 100, 1 to 100, but not as dramatically as you would think, right?
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if there's any implication around like the size of company and what they're selling. You know what I mean? Like, is it a higher ticket item? That shouldn't, it shouldn't always be that way,
hmm
right? Like, that shouldn't be a hard and fast rule. Like, the bigger company you are, the more your platform costs. But you know what I mean? I wonder if there might be some correlation there. Yeah, there's some weird, interesting correlations that could be going on
Yeah,
in the
it's
data.
super interesting because you'd think, to break into to get an opportunity at like a company, let's say like Google, would be significantly more expensive and harder than, just a 50-person startup.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe there's something to do with like how long the company's been advertising, right? Because if you're a smaller company and like you really have only been advertising for a couple of years, maybe people really don't know you. Whereas you're established, you've been marketing forever, and it's like, oh, everyone's seen your stuff for so long, it's like they haven't converted yet. They might not, and it's harder for each incremental
Totally.
conversion. I don't know. I keep wondering when I see all these demos come in, I'm like, how many B2B companies are there out there? I'm like, if we're driving like 400 demo requests a month, like how long can that
Right.
actually last? I have no idea how many B2B companies are even
Yeah.
out there, in the US and Canada, which is really where we're focused today. Yeah, I don't know, but hopefully that we got to create a new TAM.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean? I think that's part of it. It's like any other ones?
Yeah, the other one was the CPL by audience size. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
So
look at that. Yep.
on Facebook, it looked like larger audiences have lower CPLs, but on LinkedIn, the audience size didn't seem as relevant. And even on Facebook, it was marginal, like the difference in cost by audience size. So it's usually been like a tried and true understanding that on Facebook, because of the way they've been on a CPM basis, the larger the audience size, right, the greater the impression pool, so you can get lower cost. And then LinkedIn bids on a CPC
Yep.
basis, so it doesn't seem like the audience size is as big of a factor. So I thought that was interesting.
So I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that size doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
exactly. Size doesn't matter. You heard it here
Nice.
first.
Nice. Yep. There you go, people. Audience size doesn't seem to matter
Yep.
that much. Yeah, no, I was surprised by that too. That's funny. We just wanted to say size doesn't matter. That's all. But no, but honestly, it didn't. I thought it was going to be different, but like even the one to like, what was it, one to
Hmm.
1,000 or something, or one to 10,000, we bucketed these, right? We had to bucket these in some way. I was thinking that one would be a lot higher. You know what I
Yep.
mean? But it was like they're all within. But from a CPL perspective, it seemed like they were all within a couple $100, or sorry, like tens of dollars
Yeah,
almost
it
of
was
each other.
marginal. It wasn't anything dramatic.
Yeah,
I think the big thing
yeah,
too that we miss is like a different way of framing your thought process around audiences is a lot of times we kind of get caught up on like the recommendations of Facebook or LinkedIn, and if you listen to them, you would have an audience size of like 2 million people every time, and anything underneath that is like too small. Versus like as B2B marketers, we're interested in a fixed universe, a very specific profile, etc. So you can't think in terms of like traditional channel recommendations. So the one thing I always tell like customers is like,
yeah,
remember at the end of the day, if your ad is not getting in front of the right person, everything else is going to suffer, right? So we have to dial that in.
yeah,
The audience size really, instead of framing it as like it's going to make or break the performance of this campaign, think of it as just like a way of understanding how much scale is available, how much additional spend can we put against this audience, but that should never dictate whether or not you use that audience. If it's a high value audience for you and has an
yeah,
audience size of 1,000, but like it is the most wonderful, amazing, highest quality, 1,000 individuals that you can get in front
yeah,
of, like you should.
yeah. Right. Yeah, and again, test
Hmm.
it out, right? Like, so maybe you create an audience the smallest you can, but it's like there's reasons they have
Yeah.
intent. The technographic shows they've got your competitor, like whatever it is. You've got all these reasons to like this is our list. Try that, go a little broader. Try that, and you can experiment and kind of see where the sweet spot is. I thought was interesting on the audience size thing was like a majority of our experiments are run with audience sizes above 100,000 people, and to me, I'm kind of like that feels pretty broad, and I thought, oh, maybe these are mostly brand
Hmm.
awareness. They're not. Those were most like vast majority CPL campaigns. And so I was like, that was a sign to me that we got gated content people going on here, right? Because like if you've got that big of an audience, you're not selling to that many people. And you're doing like CPL, which for us is like a lead gen campaign. That's got to be gated content in my mind. Like that's not demo requests. And actually, I did subsegment it a little bit more and try and get to demos and events, and it was like a very very small
Hmm.
percent. So it's like also, come on, people, like let's start to turn around the gated content stuff a little bit,
I can
maybe.
see all the
And
customers in my mind right now because I'm so involved with like their day to day. And yeah, a lot of it is gated
yeah,
content for sure. Generally speaking,
yeah,
the rule of thumb is for clients is if you have an audience size greater than 250, it's you have an opportunity to really get more specific. The challenge,
so you think even up to 250 is actually pretty
it all
valid?
depends on how the audience is built. Because I've seen clients build
Yeah.
audiences with just job titles, and they have an audience size of like 200,000, 220, but it's like on
Yep.
the money because it's exactly the right titles, the right people, the right employee accounts, etc. They just have a very popular persona that they're going after.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Nice. Well, one more little point, I think, cost per opportunity. So, we talked about this in the beginning a little bit, but this is one where it's so wildly
Totally.
different. And this is one where like looking at averages kind of gets you hung up. But just to give you a little range for like our data, companies in our software industry, which is our biggest representation of customers, they average like $2,600 cost per triggered opportunity. That's pretty good. But if you look at the average, it's $6,000. You'd be like, oh, well, shit. But our manufacturing clients, they're okay with a $10,000 cost per opportunity. And we have, and I won't even mention the industry because there's probably one customer in it, so I don't want to out it. But there's another industry where they have a over $100,000 cost per opportunity, and they're like, "Yep," because it's like they're selling something that is they have the most niche audience, and they're selling something that costs millions and millions of dollars. You know what I mean? And so like they're fine with a handful of leads, high cost per lead. But again, it's funny because like this customer is happy, but yet that $100,000 cost per opportunity just gets wrapped up into our averages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like that's why it's important. And maybe next year maybe we'll actually won't release an entire full benchmark report because it's just like it's hard to get like good insights from
Yeah,
these
maybe
super
break it up by
averages
vertical or strategies or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, I think we'll have to. Yep, I think we'll have to just to make it
I
more
was even thinking
meaningful.
too for like
But
brand awareness, adding more account-based metrics to report on. I think super
yeah,
valuable.
yes, yeah, for sure. And then kind of looking at display next year too. So shit, we better get started on this thing right now. Nice. All right. Well, we're up on time, Silvio. This was awesome. Thanks for doing another episode of Demand Gen U with us. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, give us a nice little 5-star rating. Subscribe to the podcast so you get to see all the future episodes. But thanks again for listening. We really appreciate it.